Hello, class, and welcome to today's lecture where we begin our journey into the origin of life. So up to this point, we've talked about, speciation and microevolution, natural selection, and all those theories, all those ideas have very good evidence for them, observations, physical evidence. But now we're getting into some ideas about how life arose on this planet. And when it comes to this concept, guys, there's not a lot of good theories, but there are some hypotheses that have some evidence based on assumptions. But this is where it gets a little bit more murky when it comes to actual evidence that supports these hypotheses. So here we have a picture of what maybe the early Earth was like. And you kind of see a couple of things. You see possibly water being available, some volcanic activity, maybe some sulfur springs. So once again, that's what our conversation is going to be today, all about how life possibly arose on this planet. And like I mentioned, guys, when it comes to the tree of life, the unity of life, how organisms are related to each other, descent with modification, for that, we have good evidence. And we kind of talked about it with our notes. But now we're looking down here. How did life possibly even arise on our planet? And once again, Darwin never even talked about this. He had no idea about how possibly life arose. But this is where, once again, we have a couple hypotheses that we're going to discuss and mostly focus on one. Now, before we can discuss these hypotheses, we got to define, guys, what is life? What does it mean to actually be a living organism? Guys, what are some characteristics you think that are required for life, for an organism to have life? Hopefully you're thinking about it and you're saying, one, for sure, cells. Life is made up of cells, unicellular, multicellular organisms. All life has to be organized as cells. Maybe you thought also, hey, they have to respond to stimuli. In other words, they have to respond to the environment, heat, light, any chemicals. They have to respond to their environment. Maybe you mentioned that they have to have homeostasis. They have to regulate their internal processes. In other words, maintain homeostasis. They also have to be able to use energy and grow. In other words, they have to metabolize. They have to do catabolism. They have to do anabolism as well. They also probably have to develop. They have to change and mature within their lifetime. So that's another characteristic of life. And the big one, they have to be able to reproduce. They have to be able to reproduce so they could continue their species, continue life. And guys, when it comes to reproduction, you have heredity, you have DNA and RNA, and then you have adaptation and evolution. Because of reproduction, you're going to allow for adaptation and evolution to occur. Now, when it comes to the origin of life, guys, there are three kind of big hypotheses. There's several, but there's kind of three big hypotheses. So let's look at these. First, special creation. And guys, for this, insert your God here. God, Buddha, Ganesh, whatever spiritual or being that you possibly believe, or maybe you don't believe in any. This is that hypothesis that life was created by this supernatural or divine force. They put all life on this planet. Now, what is the issue, though, with this hypothesis? If you said it's not testable, that's right. It's not something that you can test. This is solely based on your faith, on your belief. Now, another hypothesis, extraterrestrial origin. Yes, that's right, aliens. Now, there's extremes to this. There's the extreme that aliens visited our planet and kind of sprinkled the ingredients for life. Or there's more kind of acceptable ideas, at least in the scientific world, where maybe life was on a meteor, that cells or the living building blocks of life were in a meteor, it collided with our planet, and that's how life started to arise. Now, is this testable? Guys, it is, because what hits our planet pretty much every day? Meteors. Meteors hit our planet. We could examine those meteors and see, are there any signs of life? Is there organic material? Are there possibly cells? And then we have the last kind of big hypothesis, spontaneous abiotic origin. What is this? The idea that life just spontaneously arose from inorganic molecules, that life just kind of popped up from the ingredients that were available. Now, is this testable? Yes, it is testable. And guys, this is the hypothesis we're going to look at, because this is the one where we have some evidence. Now, the evidence isn't extremely strong, but we have evidence, we have some observations, we're making some big assumptions, but this is possibly what could have occurred. So that's the one we're going to focus on. Now, one of the big things we had to first figure out if we're going to think about this idea of spontaneous abiotic origin is, guys, what was the Earth like very early on? The Earth, formed about 4.6 billion years ago. But what was it like? Well, scientists believe that it was possibly composed of a reducing atmosphere. What does that mean? Well, that the ingredients available very early, like about 4 billion years ago, well, we believe there was a lot of water vapor, carbon dioxide, nitrogen, hydrogen, methane, sulfur. Now, how do we know? Guys, we don't. We don't know. We're not 100% sure. We came to this assumption by looking at other planets in our solar system, other planets around our galaxy that are kind of maybe the same distance away from a star. And we kind of came to the conclusion, well, they're made up of these materials. That's probably what was available. Now, notice something, though. There's a lot of hydrogen in there, which means they have a lot of electrons. Remember, electrons are key because that's where energy's at, transfer of energy. Notice something else, though. What's missing from this atmosphere? If you said free oxygen, you're right. Notice there's no O2. Notice the oxygen is trapped in water, carbon dioxide, but there's no free oxygen, which means with no free oxygen, you can't really break down any organic molecules, which kind of at the beginning was not a big deal because, once again, there wasn't any organic material. Notice all this is inorganic material. Now, we also believe there were some energy sources available very early in our planet. What kind of energy? Lightning, for sure, UV radiation from the sun, heat from the sun, volcanic activity. These were some of the energy sources available, 4 billion years ago. So this is, once again, what we think our atmosphere was like, what the Earth was like, once again, 4 billion years ago, before life possibly even arose. And we call this kind of our, once again, reducing atmosphere hypothesis, actually developed in 1920 by Operon and Halden. Once again, they made those assumptions by looking at other planets in our solar system, other planets in our galaxy as well. Now, with that said, then we take it to our next jump. In 1953, Miller and Urey, who were doing their experiments at the University of Chicago, kind of test this hypothesis. Well, okay, let's get all these ingredients, everything we think was available. Let's put it in this huge glass apparatus. And let's see, from all this organic material, from all this inorganic material, can we actually get organic material? And that's big. If you form organic material, remember, life is organic. So maybe that's how life started to arise. So this is kind of like a little diagram of what their apparatus looked like. They had water in there, they had nitrogen, they had methane and hydrogen. They gave a little electrical sparks to represent lightning. They shot it with UV radiation. Once again, they heated it to represent kind of volcanic activity. And guys, they let this run for weeks, for months. And guys, to everybody's amazement, they started to form organic compounds. And one of the first things they formed were amino acids. And guys, that's huge, because what are amino acids? What are the building blocks to? Hopefully you remember, they're the building blocks of proteins. And guys, remember, proteins pretty much do all the work for any sort of living organism. So they're also able to form a nitrogen base, adenine. And guys, that's also big time, because where do you find adenine? Hopefully you're like DNA, RNA. Yeah, not just DNA, RNA, also ATP. Remember, adenosine triphosphate, an energy molecule. So that's huge. So once again, from all this inorganic material, they were able to form organic compounds. So once again, this was huge. This is a picture of their entire apparatus. This is a picture of Stanley Miller. Once again, produced at the University of Chicago. And guys, they let this run for months. They changed concentrations, amount of energy, and they were able to produce a lot of amino acids. And once again, that's key because they make proteins, hydrocarbons, which is kind of the beginnings of lipids, of fats, nitrogen bases, which are the key thing in DNA and RNA, and some other organic molecules as well. So once again, this was huge. Now, once again, do we know this for sure? No, because we don't know what the concentrations exactly were in the early Earth, the amount of energy, but they played around with this and they were able to make this happen. So getting organic material from inorganic material was kind of that first step. It was kind of showing that first step that, hey, maybe this is how life started to get a foothold. Now, guys, just being organic material doesn't mean, oh, all of a sudden we have life. No, there were other things that needed to come around. So This is the first big thing, though, forming organic material from inorganic substances. Now, the next big step is, okay, how do you go from that, from organic material to possibly the first actual cell? Well, maybe it's these cell-created structures called protobionts. I call them magic bubbles. They're little tiny bubbles that they're able to form in labs, where what they do is it's these bubbles that are a little bit different than a regular bubble because they have a lipid membrane. They're abiotic molecules surrounded by a phospholipid membrane. And it kind of was the first thing that possibly separated the outside world from the inside world. And what's kind of cool about these protobionts, they could do simple metabolism and reproduction, where kind of maybe a sugar comes in and they break it down to something and then it leaves as something else. And they could also split into new bubbles. So kind of a cool thing they were able to create when they started to mix some of these organic molecules and kind of leave them to be. After a while, these protobionts started to kind of form. Now notice, is this a cell? No, there's no DNA in there. There's no RNA. They're not really using energy yet. Really, they're just breaking something down to something else. They do kind of reproduce, they split into new bubbles, but hey, maybe this is kind of the first, kind of maybe a shell of what a cell is. So once again, we have the formation of organic material from inorganic material, maybe forming these protobionts. And then we have to figure out, well, then how did genetic material come to be? Now, you would think, oh, how did DNA form? Actually, we don't actually think DNA was the first genetic material. We actually think RNA probably and most likely evolved first before DNA. And there's a couple of reasons why. First of all, RNA is a lot more multifunctional than DNA. RNA does a lot of things. And remember, there's a lot of different types of RNAs. We have tRNA, rRNA, mRNA. So first of all, it could code information. Messenger RNA, it could have instructions to make things. They're self-replicating. RNA can actually make copies of itself, which allows for inheritance to be possible. It can allow for natural selection and evolution to occur if it's replicating itself, because mutations could occur in there. It could have enzymatic functions. Some RNA work as actual enzymes where they could actually help break something down, speed up certain processes. They're actually usually referred to as ribozymes, RNA that kind of have enzymatic functions. And they also help with replication. Notice a lot of enzymes help in replication and transcription and translation. And then it could also act as a regulatory molecule as well. So it's a lot more multifunctional, even work as a transport molecule. tRNA transports amino acids. So it does a lot more functions. So we actually think RNA possibly evolved first, and then DNA kind of evolved afterwards to just specify in storing the genetic code. So now you have genetic material, you have organic material, you have protobionts. Put them all together and you're pretty much ready to kind of start to form your first cell, which once again, do we know for sure? No, but we have all these ingredients. Possibly that next step that happened was that first cell started to arise. So well, actually, let me go back. We're going to stop here. I think this is a good stopping point for this first set of notes over the origin of life. Once again, we have these hypotheses, not great theories. Once again, we don't have great evidence for this, but at least for this hypothesis of spontaneous abiotic origin, we have some experiments that show possibly this is what could have happened if these conditions were right. So guys, we're going to stop here. Guys, I'll continue to drop more lectures over this, possibly 2 more lectures over the origin of life. Hopefully drop them on Friday and then on the weekend, getting you ready for that quiz, that Edmodo quiz on Monday. Well, guys, I hope you all have a great day. And guys, once again, make sure you keep focused, work on your problem sets. Don't forget the Khan Academy lessons as well. And make sure if you have any questions or concerns, reach out to me, email, Edmodo, Instagram. Make sure that you come into contact if issues come about with your distance learning. Well, guys, that's all for today. Guys, have yourself an awesome day.